The crystal matrix hummed with unstable energy as senior researcher Zixtar desperately recalibrated the dimensional anchor for the 7th time in 3 standard cycles. The Confederation's most advanced research station, Nexus Prime, had been attempting to establish contact with what their long-range sensors indicated was a powerful warrior civilization from the Outer Rim territories. The war against the Devourers was going poorly, and the Confederation Council had authorized any means necessary to find military allies. "The resonance frequency is still fluctuating," chirped his assistant, a young Zilithian named Velana. Her 4 arms danced across the control surfaces while her compound eyes tracked multiple data streams simultaneously. "The target species appears to have some form of quantum signature that's interfering with our summoning protocols." Zixtar's tentacles writhed in frustration. As a member of the intellectual Kethvari species, he prided himself on precision and calculation. The summoning chamber before them was a marvel of Confederation technology, designed to transport individual representatives of distant civilizations across vast distances for diplomatic contact. It had worked flawlessly for over 2 centuries, bringing peaceful species into the fold of the galactic community. "Show me the target analysis again," he commanded, his bioluminescent patches flickering with anxiety. The holographic display materialized above them, showing a small blue and green world orbiting a yellow star. The planet teemed with electromagnetic signatures and showed clear signs of an industrial civilization. More importantly, their deep space monitoring arrays had detected massive energy signatures consistent with weapons of incredible destructive power. Nuclear fusion signatures, antimatter traces, and something their computers couldn't quite identify but registered as catastrophically dangerous. "The species calls themselves humans," Velana reported, consulting her datapad. "Bipedal, carbon-based, apparently highly aggressive based on their energy signatures. Perfect candidates for our military alliance against the Devourers." The Devourers were exactly what their name suggested. A mechanical hive mind that consumed entire star systems, converting all matter into more copies of themselves. They had already claimed 17 Confederation worlds, and their advance seemed unstoppable. Traditional Confederation species were primarily peaceful, having evolved beyond warfare centuries ago. They needed allies who understood violence, who could match the Devourer's relentless aggression. "Initiating summoning sequence," Zixtar announced, his voice carrying across the observation deck where dozens of diplomats and military officials from across the Confederation waited. Representatives of the crystalline Thexani, the ethereal Vorlashi, the insectoid Zilithians, and a dozen other species watched with anticipation. The summoning chamber filled with swirling energy as dimensional barriers began to thin. The process typically required enormous amounts of power to transport a single individual across interstellar distances, but the Confederation's fusion reactors could easily handle the load. What worried Zixtar was the unusual readings he was getting from the target location. "Sir?" Velana's voice carried a note of concern. "The energy expenditure is climbing beyond normal parameters. It's as if the summoning is expanding." "Expanding how?" Zixtar demanded, his attention split between the control systems and the swirling vortex of energy in the chamber. "I'm not sure. The dimensional anchor seems to be latching onto multiple targets instead of just one. The quantum entanglement is spreading across a much wider area than anticipated." Warning lights began flashing throughout the station. The power draw was increasing exponentially, forcing the backup reactors to come online. On the main display, energy readings spiked to levels that should have been impossible for a summoning of this type. "Abort the sequence," called out Admiral Thexara, the military liaison for the project. Her crystalline form vibrated with alarm frequencies that resonated through the observation deck. "I can't," Zixtar replied, his tentacles flying across the controls. "The dimensional anchor has achieved quantum lock. If I abort now, the backlash could tear a hole in space-time." The energy in the summoning chamber began to coalesce, but instead of the small platform designed for a single individual, the entire chamber filled with brilliant light. The very air seemed to tear apart as something vast began to emerge from the dimensional rift. "By the ancient codes," whispered Velena, her compound eyes reflecting the impossible sight before them. The first thing that emerged was not a single human diplomat as planned, but the nose cone of something massive and metallic. As more of the object materialized, it became clear that they had somehow summoned an entire spacecraft. The vessel was sleek yet aggressive in design, bristling with weapon arrays and sensor clusters that immediately began scanning their surroundings. But that was only the beginning. As the first ship fully materialized in the now expanded summoning chamber, the dimensional rift continued to widen. A second ship emerged, then a third. These weren't small diplomatic vessels or even single warships. They were massive dreadnoughts, each one easily the size of a Confederation space station. "How many are coming through?" Admiral Thexera demanded, her crystalline form now pulsing with deep alarm frequencies. Velena's voice was barely a whisper as she consulted her instruments. "Sir, I'm reading quantum signatures for approximately 300 vessels." The observation deck fell silent, except for the humming of overstressed equipment. Through the reinforced viewing panels, they watched as ship after ship materialized. Cruisers, destroyers, carrier vessels with launch bays already opening to disgorge smaller fighter craft. Each vessel bore the same aggressive design philosophy, built for war in a way that no Confederation ship had been designed for millennia. "This is impossible," muttered Dr. Colvin, the Vorlashi physicist whose theories had made the summoning technology possible. "The power requirements alone should have overloaded our reactors 10 times over." "The humans appear to have some form of quantum resonance," Zixtar observed, his scientific mind still functioning despite the crisis unfolding before them. "Their ships are somehow drawing power from their own dimension to maintain the summoning. They're powering their own transportation." The largest ship, a massive dreadnought that dwarfed even Confederation capital ships, had finished materializing. Its hull was scarred from countless battles, and weapon ports that could accommodate projectiles the size of small asteroids were already beginning to track toward the station. Suddenly, a beam of coherent light erupted from the flagship, but instead of weapons fire, it was a communication laser. "Unknown station," a voice crackled through the translation matrix, speaking in heavily accented Standard Galactic that the humans had somehow already learned. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Colonial Defense Force First Fleet. We received what appeared to be a distress signal originating from your coordinates. Are you under attack? Please identify yourselves and state the nature of your emergency." The assembled Confederation officials stared at each other in stunned silence. They had intended to summon one human diplomat to discuss a potential military alliance. Instead, they had accidentally triggered what appeared to be humanity's first response protocol for distress calls, bringing an entire military fleet across impossible distances to answer what they perceived as a call for help. Admiral Thexera stepped forward, her crystalline form shifting to project calming frequencies. Admiral Chen, this is Admiral Thexera of the Galactic Confederation Defense Command. There appears to have been a miscommunication regarding our summoning attempt." "Summoning attempt?" The human's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Are you saying you dragged us across half the galaxy without our consent? That's an act of war by most civilized standards." No! Zixtar interjected quickly, activating the general communication array. "There has been a terrible misunderstanding. We were attempting to initiate diplomatic contact with your species to request assistance against a mutual threat. Our technology was only supposed to bring one representative, not an entire fleet." There was a long pause during which the Confederation officials could see smaller human vessels spreading throughout the system, establishing defensive perimeters with military precision that spoke of long experience with hostile encounters. These weren't the peaceful explorers that most species became once they achieved interstellar travel. These were warriors, and they moved like they expected every contact to potentially be their last. A mutual threat? Admiral Chen's voice returned, slightly less hostile but still wary. Explain. The main display activated, showing the progression of Devourer attacks across Confederation space. The mechanical monsters' systematic consumption of entire worlds, their adaptation to every defensive strategy, their seemingly endless reproduction rate. As the data played, Zixtar noticed that the human ship's aggressive posturing began to shift to something that looked almost eager. "How long has this been going on?" Admiral Chen asked. 18 standard months, Admiral Thexara replied. "They've taken 17 of our worlds and show no signs of slowing. Our defensive capabilities are insufficient for this type of warfare." Another pause, during which the Confederation officials could only wait and hope that they hadn't just triggered a three-way war by accidentally conscripting humanity into their conflict. "Admiral Thexara," came the human response. "I'm going to need a full tactical briefing on these Devourers, ship dispositions, attack patterns, technological capabilities, and current defensive positions. My fleet stands ready to assist." You're willing to help?" Velana asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "You called for help," Admiral Chen replied simply. "We answered. That's what we do." As if to emphasize the point, the massive human fleet began forming into battle formations with practiced ease, their weapon systems powering up and shield generators, creating overlapping defensive fields that turned the motley collection of ships into a unified wall of destruction waiting to be unleashed. The Confederation had sought one ally. Through accident and misunderstanding, they had found an entire civilization that apparently considered responding to distress calls with overwhelming military force to be standard operating procedure. As Zixtar watched the human fleet prepare for a war they hadn't started against an enemy they'd never seen, he couldn't help but think that perhaps their mistake might turn out to be the greatest stroke of luck in Confederation history. "Admiral Chen," he transmitted, "welcome to the Galactic Confederation. We have much to discuss." Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the TCS Indomitable, studying the holographic displays that showed the Devourer threat assessment with the cold, analytical gaze that had carried her through 30 years of military service. Around her, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency, their movements betraying none of the amazement they felt at their current situation. Being accidentally teleported across half the galaxy was certainly a first, even for the battle-hardened veterans of the Terran Colonial Defense Force. "Tactical assessment complete, Admiral," reported Commander James Wright, her Chief of Staff. "The enemy designation Devourers appears to be accurate. They're a self-replicating mechanical intelligence that consumes all matter to create more copies of themselves. Standard von Neumann machine scenario, but with aggressive expansion protocols." Chen nodded, her augmented eyes processing the data streams faster than baseline humans could follow. "Population centers? They don't take prisoners or establish slave populations. Complete consumption of all biological matter within 6 hours of planetary occupation. 17 worlds, approximately 43 billion sentient beings." The bridge fell silent for a moment. These numbers represented entire civilizations, billions of lives snuffed out by an enemy that saw organic life as nothing more than raw materials. It was the kind of threat that the TCDF had been created to face, though they'd never encountered anything quite this systematic in its destruction. "Fleet status?" Chen asked. "All 300 ships report ready for combat operations. The accidental summoning seems to have brought us here with full fuel, ammunition, and supplies. Whatever technology these Confederation people used, it's incredibly sophisticated." Wright paused, consulting his tablet. The alien representatives are requesting permission to come aboard for a formal briefing. Chen considered this. The Confederation species seemed genuinely peaceful, almost naively so. Their technology was impressive, but their military doctrine appeared to be centuries out of date. The summoning device alone represented scientific achievements that humanity was still decades away from matching. Yet they'd used it desperately to call for help against an enemy their own forces couldn't handle. Permission granted. Conference Room 3. Full diplomatic protocol, but keep security teams on standby. We're still figuring out exactly what we've gotten ourselves into here. An hour later, Chen found herself seated across from what had to be the strangest diplomatic gathering in human history. Admiral Thexara was a living crystal formation that communicated through harmonic vibrations, while Dr. Zixtar appeared to be some sort of cephalopod with bioluminescent communication patches. The young assistant, Velana, looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a butterfly, her forearms constantly in motion as she took notes on multiple devices simultaneously. "The situation is quite desperate," Admiral Thexara began, her crystalline form producing sounds that the translation matrix converted to accented standard English. "The Devourers adapt to our defensive strategies faster than we can implement them. Each attack wave is more sophisticated than the last." Chen leaned forward, her command presence filling the room even as she maintained diplomatic courtesy. "Show me their attack patterns." The holographic display activated, showing the progression of Devourer assaults across Confederation space. Chen's expression grew increasingly grim as she watched the mechanical swarms systematically dismantle planetary defenses, consume industrial infrastructure, and turn entire worlds into replication facilities for more Devourer units. "They learn," she observed. "Each attack incorporates countermeasures for whatever defense worked best in the previous engagement. It's an intelligent swarm, not just automated." "Precisely," Dr. Zixtar confirmed, his bioluminescent patches flickering with what the translation system interpreted as agreement. "We believe there's a central intelligence directing the swarm, but we've been unable to locate it. Every time we think we've found a command ship, it turns out to be just another node in the network." Chen studied the tactical data with the eye of someone who had spent her entire adult life learning how to destroy things efficiently. "What's your current defensive posture?" "We've established fortified positions around our core worlds," Admiral Thexara replied. "Orbital defense platforms, energy barriers, automated weapon systems, but they're not enough. The Devourers simply overwhelm our positions with numerical superiority." "Static defenses," Chen muttered, shaking her head. "No wonder you're losing." The aliens looked confused, their various forms of expression all conveying the same uncertainty. Chen realized that she was dealing with species that had evolved beyond warfare so completely that they'd forgotten the basic principles of military strategy. "You're fighting a defensive war against an enemy that grows stronger with every engagement," she explained. "Every ship they destroy, every world they consume, every piece of technology they analyze just makes them more dangerous. You can't win by trying to hold ground against something like this." "Then what do you suggest?" Dr. Zixtar asked. Chen smiled. And there was something predatory in the expression that made the peaceful Confederation representatives unconsciously lean back. "We take the fight to them. Hit them fast, hit them hard, and never give them time to analyze our tactics." Over the next several hours, Chen outlined humanity's approach to warfare against superior numbers: mobility over static defense, asymmetric tactics that denied the enemy opportunities to study human methods, strike operations designed to cause maximum disruption rather than simply destroying individual targets. "Your species has a remarkably violent history," Velana observed, after Chen had finished explaining the concept of scorched earth tactics. "That's true," Chen admitted without shame. "We've been fighting wars for our entire recorded history. It's taught us things that more peaceful species never needed to learn." Such as? Admiral Thexara asked. That sometimes the only way to protect what you love is to be willing to destroy everything else. Chen's voice carried the weight of hard experience. We've learned to be very, very good at destruction. The briefing was interrupted when Commander Wright's voice crackled through the communication system. Admiral, we're receiving priority alerts from our perimeter scouts. Something big is heading this way. Chen was on her feet immediately. On our way. The bridge was a controlled chaos of activity when they arrived. The main tactical display showed a swarm of contacts approaching the Nexus Prime system, their energy signatures matching the Devourer profile exactly. How many? Chen demanded. Initial count shows approximately 800 individual units, Wright reported. They'll be in weapons range of the station in 6 hours. Admiral Thexara made a sound that the translator rendered as distressed crystalline chiming. It's the largest attack force they've ever assembled. They must have detected your fleet's arrival. Chen studied the approaching swarm with professional interest. Probably. A force this size suggests they consider us a significant threat. She turned to her communications officer. Signal the fleet. All ships to battle stations. Prepare for Operation Hammer Drop. Admiral, Dr. Zixtar interjected urgently, you cannot engage that force directly. Our analysis indicates they have more than enough firepower to destroy your entire fleet. Your analysis is based on Confederation military doctrine, Chen replied calmly. We don't fight the way you do. She activated the fleet-wide communications array, her voice carrying to every ship in the human formation. All vessels, this is Admiral Chen. We have an incoming hostile force that outnumbers us nearly 3-1. They're expecting to face another defensive force that will try to protect static positions. Chen paused, looking out at the stars where her fleet waited in perfect formation. 300 ships crewed by humans who had volunteered to serve on the frontier, knowing that they might be called upon to face impossible odds in defense of human colonies. They're about to learn that humans don't fight like anyone else in the galaxy, she continued. We're not here to defend this station. We're here to teach these mechanical parasites that some species bite back. All ships, implement Formation Serpent Strike. We're going hunting. The human fleet began to move, and Admiral Thexara watched in fascination as 300 warships arranged themselves into a formation unlike anything in Confederation military databases. Instead of the traditional wall formations designed to protect space behind them, the humans formed a three-dimensional spearhead that seemed designed for one purpose, punching through enemy lines at maximum velocity. Admiral Chen, Admiral Thexara said quietly, what exactly is Operation Hammer Drop? Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. You called for help, and we answered. Now we're going to show these devourers what happens when they threaten species under human protection. As if summoned by her words, the first salvo of human weapons fire erupted across space. But instead of the energy beams and plasma discharges that Confederation forces typically employed, the human weapons were something entirely different. Kinetic projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, each one carrying enough energy to crack a moon, nuclear warheads that detonated in precise patterns to create corridor of destruction through the Devourer formation. But most impressive of all was the coordination. 300 ships moving as one organism, their fire patterns interlocking to create zones of destruction that no individual vessel could survive. The humans fought like a pack of predators, using tactics that the peaceful Confederation species had never imagined. By the ancient codes, whispered Velana as she watched the human fleet tear into the Devourer formation like a hot knife through ice. They're not just soldiers, they're artists of war. Chen heard the comment and nodded grimly. We've had a lot of practice. On the tactical display, the Devourer formation began to adapt, their individual units clustering together to present overlapping fields of fire. But the human fleet was already moving, their formation shifting and flowing like a living thing, never presenting the same tactical profile twice. "They're trying to analyze our attack patterns," Commander Wright reported. "Good," Chen replied. "Let them try. They've never seen anything like us before." The battle for Nexus Prime lasted 8 hours and redefined everything the Confederation thought they knew about warfare. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the research station, watching the final Devourer stragglers flee into hyperspace while human salvage teams worked to recover anything useful from the wreckage field that stretched across half the system. "I don't understand," Dr. Zixtar said for the 20th time, his bioluminescent patches flickering in patterns that the translation matrix interpreted as complete bewilderment. They had numerical superiority, adaptive technology, and tactical analysis capabilities that should have given them every advantage. Chen smiled, still feeling the adrenaline rush of successful combat operations. "They had advantages based on fighting Confederation forces. We're not the Confederation." The tactical analysis playing on the main display showed the battle from multiple angles. The Devourer formation had initially performed exactly as expected, adapting to human weapon signatures and attempting to create defensive countermeasures. But humanity's approach to warfare wasn't based on technological superiority or defensive positioning. "Your fleet never maintained the same formation for more than 12 minutes, Admiral Thexara observed, her crystalline form vibrating with frequencies that suggested deep analysis. "Every time the Devourers began to adapt to your tactics, you changed them completely?" "Doctrine of adaptive warfare," Commander Wright explained, consulting the after-action reports streaming in from the fleet. "We learned long ago that any tactic used too long becomes a predictable tactic. The moment an enemy starts to counter your strategy, you abandon it and try something completely different." Velana's 4 arms danced across her recording devices as she tried to document everything the humans had done. But how do you coordinate such complex maneuvers across 300 ships without a centralized command system? "Our analysis shows that your vessels were making independent tactical decisions while maintaining perfect formation cohesion." "Mission-type orders," Chen replied. "We tell our ship commanders what we want to accomplish, not how to accomplish it. Every captain in the fleet is trained to think independently while working toward the common goal." The concept seemed to fascinate the Confederation representatives. Their own military structures relied heavily on centralized command and control, with detailed orders flowing down from command staff to individual units. The idea of giving ship captains the authority to improvise in the middle of battle was revolutionary to species that had structured their entire civilizations around careful planning and consensus building. The Devourer's adaptive algorithms are designed to counter consistent patterns, Dr. Zixtar realized, but if there are no consistent patterns to analyze, then they're fighting blind, Chen finished. Every encounter teaches them less about us than the previous one taught us about them. The conversation was interrupted as the main communication array activated. The image of Captain Rodriguez appeared, commanding officer of the TCS Retribution, one of the heavy cruisers that had spearheaded the assault on the Devourer formation. "Admiral, we've completed analysis of the wreckage samples. You're going to want to see this." Chen nodded. "Transfer your findings to the station's main display." The holographic projector activated, showing detailed scans of Devourer technology. But instead of the purely mechanical constructs they had expected, the analysis revealed something far more disturbing. "They're not just machines," Rodriguez reported. "Each unit contains what appears to be the preserved neural matter of organic beings. The Devourers aren't just consuming civilizations for raw materials. They're converting them." The observation deck fell silent as the implications sank in. The 17 worlds that had fallen to the Devourers hadn't just been destroyed. Their populations had been transformed into components of the very force that threatened the rest of the galaxy. 43 billion people, Admiral Thexara whispered, her harmonic frequencies carrying notes of horror. They're all still alive in there. Chen's expression hardened. What had begun as a military operation to assist an allied species had just become something much more personal. The TCDF had standing orders regarding the treatment of enslaved populations, and those orders were very clear. "Commander Wright," she said quietly, "signal the fleet. We're not withdrawing to human space." "Admiral?" Wright asked, though his tone suggested he already knew what was coming. "The mission parameters have changed. We're not just here to help the Confederation anymore." Chen turned to address the alien representatives directly. "We're here to liberate every single person the Devourers have taken." Dr. Zixtar's tentacles writhed with agitation. "Admiral Chen, that would require assaulting 17 heavily fortified star systems. Even with your superior tactics, the odds against success would be astronomical." "The odds don't matter," Chen replied simply. "Those people called for help, even if they don't know it yet. We're going to answer." Admiral Thexara stepped forward, her crystalline form pulsing with rapid harmonic frequencies. "Admiral Chen, the Confederation cannot ask you to sacrifice your fleet for people you've never met." Chen smiled, and there was something fierce and protective in the expression. "You're not asking us to. We're volunteering. It's what we do." Over the next several days, Nexus Prime became the center of the largest military planning operation in Confederation history. Human tactical experts worked alongside Confederation scientists to develop new strategies for assaulting Devourer-held systems. The aliens' advanced technology, combined with human military doctrine, began producing weapons and tactics that neither species could have developed alone. The breakthrough came when Dr. Zixtar realized that the same dimensional manipulation technology used for the accidental summoning could be weaponized. Instead of transporting ships across interstellar distances, smaller versions could be used to deliver human strike teams directly into the heart of Devourer installations. "The neural preservation systems require constant maintenance," he explained during one of the planning sessions. "If we can disrupt their central processing nodes simultaneously across multiple systems, we might be able to prevent them from destroying the converted populations before we can reverse the process." Velana had been working with human computer specialists to understand the Devourer network architecture. The collective intelligence operates on a distributed system, but there are critical junction points where the consciousness of entire worlds is stored. If we can capture those intact, we can bring them home, Chen finished. She studied the tactical projection showing 17 star systems, each one a fortress world that would have to be taken by force. How long to prepare the dimensional insertion devices? 3 weeks, Dr. Zixtar replied. But Admiral, even with our technology supporting your forces, this will be the most dangerous military operation in galactic history. The Devourers will adapt to our tactics once they understand what we're attempting. Chen nodded. That's why we're only going to give them one chance to adapt. 17 simultaneous assaults, all of them different, all of them designed to accomplish the mission before the enemy can respond. 17 different tactics? Admiral Thexara asked. 17 completely different approaches, Chen confirmed. Different weapons, different formations, different objectives. By the time they start to understand what we're doing, we'll already be extracting the captured populations. The planning continued around the clock, with human and Confederation personnel working together in ways that would have seemed impossible just days earlier. The peaceful aliens learned to think like warriors, while the human military adapted to technologies that seemed like magic. But perhaps the most remarkable development was the change in the Confederation forces themselves. Watching the humans prepare for an operation that any reasonable analysis suggested was suicide, the alien military personnel began to internalize something they had never encountered before: The absolute refusal to abandon people in need, regardless of the cost. "Why do you do it?" Velana asked Chen during one of the late-night planning sessions. "You could return to your own space. The Devourers wouldn't follow you across such a vast distance. Your people would be safe." Chen looked up from the tactical projections she had been studying. "Because we're not the kind of species that abandons people when they need help. That's not who we are. Even for people you've never met? From species you've never encountered?" Chen smiled. "Especially then. Anyone can help their friends. It takes real character to help strangers." 3 weeks later, the largest military fleet in galactic history departed Nexus Prime. 300 human warships supported by nearly 1,000 Confederation vessels, all of them carrying dimensional insertion devices that would allow strike teams to appear anywhere in a star system instantaneously. As the fleet jumped to hyperspace, splitting into 17 separate attack groups, Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and reflected on the strange series of accidents that had brought them to this point. A desperate alien scientist trying to summon one diplomat had accidentally brought an entire fleet. That fleet had encountered a threat unlike anything humanity had ever faced, and now they were committed to an operation that would either save 43 billion people or result in the destruction of the only human force capable of defending Earth's colonies. "Admiral," Commander Wright reported, "all task forces report ready for Operation Phoenix Rising." Chen nodded. In mythology, the Phoenix was reborn from its own ashes. She hoped the same would prove true for the people they were about to save. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Today we teach the galaxy that no one gets left behind. Execute Phoenix Rising." Across 17 star systems, the liberation of the galaxy began. And in each system, the Devourers learned that there were some species in the universe that considered the word impossible to be a challenge rather than a limitation. Humanity had arrived in the galaxy, and nothing would ever be the same.